she screamed once, just once. Then the entire east wing of the academy went dark, alarms dead before they even finished their first note. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because standing in that blacked-out hallway was a dog that should not have been able to sense anything a Euros. And it was staring straight at a wall, like it could see straight through to the other side. 3 seconds later, that wall exploded outward. And the weak human girl they laughed out of the combat trials was the only one still standing. 6 weeks earlier, nobody at Thessara Combat Academy thought Kessia Reyes belonged there at all. She was the only human in a graduating class of 400 alien cadets, and every single one of them had heard the same rumor. Humans came from a Deathworld, a planet so brutal it was supposed to breed monsters, warriors, killers who could survive anything. Kessia was not that. She was quiet, average height. She flinched during the zero-gravity drills. Her reflexes clocked in dead last on every simulator they ran her through. The instructors, a Euro tall, armored krill officers with 4 eyes and 0 patience a Euros, took one look at her scores and decided the rumors about Earth were exaggerated garbage. Deathworld, scoffed Instructor Vaughn during orientation, tossing her file back across the table like it was trash. This one couldn't survive a stiff breeze. The other cadets laughed. Not cruel laughter, just dismissive. The kind that stings worse because nobody thinks you're worth the effort of real cruelty. Kessia didn't argue. She never did. She just picked her file back up, tucked it under her arm, and walked to her dorm with her chin level, and her jaw tight waiting for her. There was Ranger. Ranger was a rescue mutt from Ohio, brown and scruffy. One ear that never stood upright. He wasn't bred for war. He wasn't augmented, chipped, or trained by any military program. He was just a dog who loved her, and the academy only let her keep him because emotional support species was somewhere in the exchange program's fine print. Nobody on Thessara understood why a supposed Deathworld warrior would need a comfort animal. They were about to understand a whole lot more than that, because that night, as Kessia sat on the edge of her bunk replaying every smirk from that classroom, Ranger stood up from his blanket, walked to the door of their dorm, and stopped dead. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just planted all 4 paws on the floor, lowered his head, and completely refused a Euros to move. Kessia had seen Rangers spooked before. Thunderstorms back home, fireworks on the 4th of July, the vacuum seal hiss of the transport ship when they first left Earth. This was different. This was the stillness of an animal that had locked onto something and was not backing down, no matter what. "Hey, bud. What's up?" she whispered, crouching next to him. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the door, ears pinned flat, the fur along his spine standing up in a straight, bristling line. She almost laughed it off, almost chalked it up to some weird new planet smell messing with his nose. But something in her gut a Euro, the same gut instinct that told her not to trust Vaughn's smug little smile a Euros, told her to listen, so she waited, watched. And over the next 3 days, she started noticing something the rest of the academy completely missed. Because they were all too busy underestimating her to actually pay attention, Ranger kept doing it. Same spot in the hallway outside the engineering bay. Same dead stop near the cargo lift on level 6. Every single time, cadets and staff walked right past him, like he was just a nervous pet twitching at shadows. Kessia started keeping a notebook. Old school, actual pen and paper, because some habits from a Deathworld childhood die hard. She mapped every location. Every time. Every little flinch of his ears. Meanwhile, the academy ground on exactly the way it always had a Euro, brutal, competitive, and completely uninterested in her. In hand-to-hand trials, she got tossed on her back in 4 seconds flat by a Voss cadet twice her size. In the strategy simulations, her ideas got talked over before she finished the sentence. Instructor Vaughn stopped even bothering to critique her. He just marked her scores and moved on, like she wasn't worth the breath. It should have broken her. A lot of people would have packed their bags and gone home. But here's the thing about growing up on a planet with hurricanes, wildfires, black bears, venomous snakes, and neighbors who still checked on each other during blackouts anyway. You don't learn to quit. You learn to notice. You learn patience is a weapon nobody can take from you. So while the academy dismissed her, Kessia watched. And on the 4th night, when Ranger once again refused to cross the threshold of the engineering corridor, she noticed something new. A faint smell, metallic, chemical, coming from underneath a maintenance panel that, according to the Academy's own blueprints, wasn't supposed to be there at all. Kessia didn't report it right away. Not because she didn't want to a Euros, because she'd already tried reporting something small 2 weeks earlier, a flickering light in the same wing, and the response she got from Academy staff was a bored shrug and a "we'll look into it" that clearly meant they wouldn't. If she wanted anyone to take this seriously, she needed proof. Real proof. Not "my dog was acting weird." So she did what any kid from a Deathworld does when the system won't help her. She solved it herself, late that night, with Ranger glued to her side and refusing for once a euros to hang back. Kessia pried open the maintenance panel with a multi-tool she'd smuggled from Earth in her boot lining. Behind it wasn't wiring, it was a device. Compact, dark, humming faintly with a pulse that made the hair on her arms stand up. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to be a genius to know that messing with a strange device wired into a school's power grid was how you ended up on the evening news for all the wrong reasons. Instead, she photographed it. Every angle. Then she and Ranger moved fast down the corridor and that's when they heard voices. Two of them, low, arguing in a dialect she didn't recognize, coming from the cargo lift Ranger had frozen at 3 days earlier. She ducked behind a support column, heart slamming, hand pressed over Ranger's muzzle to keep him quiet Not that he needed the reminder. He'd gone dead silent, body low, eyes locked on the lift doors. Two figures stepped out. Not Academy staff, not cadets. Their uniforms were stripped of insignia, faces half covered, moving with the kind of practiced quiet that told her exactly what they were: professionals. And professionals didn't sneak into a Combat Academy's engineering bay at 3 a.m. to fix the plumbing. Kessia's blood ran cold. This wasn't a broken light. This wasn't paranoia. Someone was planting devices throughout the school, and in less than 12 hours, 400 cadets the same ones who mocked her would be sitting in classrooms directly above them. She had two choices: run to an instructor who'd already decided she wasn't worth listening to, or handle it the way Earth taught her to handle everything nobody else believed was a real threat quietly, carefully, and completely on her own terms. She looked down at Ranger. He looked back up at her, steady, unshaken, waiting for her call. "Okay," she breathed. "Let's go be the Deathworld problem they think we're not." Here's the thing nobody at Thessara understood about Earth. It wasn't the gravity or the wildlife that made humans dangerous. It was the fact that humans had spent thousands of years solving problems with absolutely nothing handed to them. No advanced tech waiting in a vault, no instructors ready to bail them out. Just grit, teamwork, and the refusal to accept that impossible was a real answer. Kessia used every bit of that now. She couldn't disarm alien tech blind that was a fast way to get herself, and the whole wing turned into a smoking crater. But she could do something else. She could think like the girl who grew up running emergency drills at school, who knew exactly how fast a rumor moves through a building full of restless teenagers. She pulled the fire alarm, not the real one a modified panel she'd noticed on day one, tied into the ventilation override. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic. But within 90 seconds, sirens howled through every corridor of Thessara Academy, and 400 cadets who'd normally ignore her existence were now sprinting for the exits, exactly where she needed them to be. Away from that hallway, Instructor Vaughn found her seconds later, furious, demanding to know what prank she thought she was pulling. She didn't flinch. She held up her phone, device photos glowing on the screen, and said 4 words that changed everything. "Check the cargo lift." Vaughn's 4 eyes narrowed the universal alien expression for, "Are you kidding me right now, But something in her voice stopped him from dismissing her outright. Maybe it was the fact that she wasn't shouting, wasn't panicking. She was calm in a way that unsettled him more than screaming ever could. He signaled 2 armed staff members. They moved. That's when the 2 intruders, realizing they'd been made, bolted from the shadows near the engineering bay straight toward the one exit route they hadn't planned on being blocked. Straight toward Kessia. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't have backup. What she had was a dog who'd spent 3 days refusing to move because he already knew exactly where danger lived in this building And right now, Ranger wasn't backing down either. The first intruder swung a stun baton toward her head. Kessia didn't dodge like a soldier. She dodged like a kid who'd spent years diving out of the way of falling branches during hurricane cleanup Low, fast, ugly, but effective. The baton cracked against the wall instead of her skull. And Ranger, 70 pounds of scruffy Ohio rescue dog, launched himself straight at the second intruder's legs. Chaos doesn't care about your training. It doesn't care about your rank or your species or how many trophies sit in your dorm room. Chaos only cares whether you can think clearly when everything goes sideways a Euros. And that, more than reflexes or strength, was the one thing Thessara's instructors had never actually tested. Ranger clamped down hard on the second intruder's ankle, and the man went down screaming, more out of shock than pain. Kessia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the fallen stun baton off the floor and swung it exactly the way she'd been taught in every mediocre, last-place hand-to-hand session she'd ever failed a Euros. Except this time, there was no scoring rubric. There was no instructor pausing the match. There was just her dog, and two people who'd underestimated a weak human exactly the same way the entire academy had. The baton connected with the first intruder's shoulder, dropping him hard enough that he didn't get back up before Vaughn's security team rounded the corner, weapons raised, shouting orders in 3 different languages at once. It was over in under a minute. The intruders were cuffed, dragged off, and the device Kessia had photographed turned out to be exactly what she feared a Euros. A disruptor charge, powerful enough to knock out the Academy's entire shield grid for a full 10 minutes, long enough for a much larger strike force, waiting just outside Thessara's orbital defense line, to make their move, a move that never happened. Because a girl the Academy laughed out of the combat trials, and a dog nobody thought belonged on a military campus, had shut it down before it ever started. Instructor Vaughn stood in that corridor afterward, staring at the scorch mark on the wall, then at Kessia, then at Ranger, who sat calmly at her side like none of it was a big deal. "How?" Vaughn said slowly. "Did you know?" Kessia looked down at her dog, really looked at him a Euros. The crooked ear, the scruffy coat, the eyes that had never once stopped watching out for her since the day she brought him home from that shelter back in Ohio. "He didn't know anything about tech," she said. "He just knew something was wrong. And on Earth, we learn real quick a Euros. You don't ignore the ones who are trying to warn you. Not your dog, not your gut. Not the people everybody else decided weren't worth listening to." Vaughn had no answer for that. For the first time since orientation, he didn't have a single smug word left. News travels fast on a campus with 400 cadets and nothing better to gossip about, and by the next morning, the story had already twisted into a dozen different versions. Some said Kessia took down 6 intruders barehanded. Some said her dog was secretly a military prototype. None of it was true, and none of it mattered, because the one thing everyone agreed on was simple. The girl they mocked had just saved the entire academy. The formal review took 2 days. Security footage confirmed everything a Euro, the device, the intruders, the timeline. Command pulled Kessia into a debrief room expecting a nervous kid who'd gotten lucky. What they got instead was a girl who calmly laid out, in order, every single detail she'd noticed, every pattern she'd tracked in her notebook, every reason she hadn't trusted this system to listen the first time she tried. That last part landed hard. Because it was true, and everyone in that room knew it. Command Officer Draeth, the highest-ranking krill on campus, closed Kessia's file of Euros, the same file Vaughn had once tossed across a table like garbage of Euros, and set it down gently this time. "We had a student capable of noticing what our entire security network missed," Draeth said. "And we dismissed her because she didn't fit what we expected a Deathworlder to look like." Kessia didn't gloat. That wasn't her style. She just nodded, once, and said the kind of thing that would end up quoted in Academy history for the next decade. "Earth doesn't make monsters. It makes people who don't quit, even when nobody's cheering for them." Word of what happened didn't stay contained to Thessara. It spread across the sector. A human exchange student single-handedly stops a coordinated strike using nothing but instinct, a pocket knife, and a rescue dog from a shelter in Ohio. Other academies started requesting human applicants by name. Military analysts across a dozen alien systems quietly revised their threat assessments on Earth, moving humanity from overhyped rumor to a category nobody wanted to say out loud in briefings: genuinely dangerous and worse a Euros impossible to predict. Instructor Vaughn never publicly apologized. That wasn't his way. But 3 weeks later, when new cadets arrived and one of them scoffed at a human transfer student's combat scores, Vaughn cut him off cold. "Watch her dog," was all he said. "Watch her dog, and don't ever assume you know what a Deathworlder brings to the fight." Graduation day at Thessara Combat Academy came 6 months later, under twin suns that turned the whole courtyard gold. 400 cadets stood in formation, armor polished, expressions locked into practiced discipline. Kessia stood among them, no longer the girl nobody bothered looking at twice. When Command Officer Draeth called her name to present the Academy Commendation a Euros, an honor usually reserved for top combat scores. Not the cadet who'd finished dead last in nearly every physical trial. The courtyard went completely silent. Then, cadet by cadet, species by species, they started to clap. Not polite clapping. Real applause. The kind that builds until it's practically a roar. Ranger sat at the edge of the stage the whole time, tail thumping against the stone, utterly unbothered by the noise, because he'd never once needed a medal to know his job. His job was watching out for her. He'd been doing it since Ohio. He'd keep doing it long after this ceremony ended. Dreyeth pinned the commendation to Kessia's uniform and leaned in, voice low enough for just her to hear. For what it's worth €1, I don't think we ever really understood what a Deathworld produces. Not raw power. Something quieter, something that doesn't quit, doesn't panic, and doesn't need permission to do the right thing. Kessia allowed herself one small smile. You're catching on. That night, as the celebration echoed across campus, she sat outside on the academy steps with Ranger's head resting heavy on her knee, staring up at a sky full of stars that weren't the ones she grew up under. She thought about the girl who walked into orientation 6 months ago, dismissed before she even opened her mouth. She thought about every smirk, every eye roll, every Deathworlder jab thrown her way like an insult instead of the compliment it actually was. They'd been wrong about her. Wrong about all of it. Not because humans were monsters bred by a brutal planet euros, but because Earth teaches you something no simulator ever could. Pay attention, trust your instincts, protect the people and creatures who protect you back, and never, ever let someone else's low expectations decide what you're capable of, somewhere out past the twin suns. Other Deathworld exchange students were starting their own first days at academies across the sector. Getting dismissed, getting underestimated, getting laughed at by cadets who thought they already knew the whole story. They didn't, not even close. Because if there's one thing the galaxy was about to learn the hard way, it's this. Never dismiss the quiet one in the room. Especially not when her dog refuses to move.